Sylvia Plath's poem Daddy, that is included in your syllabus, and as you know, it is in CC5, paper CC5, and I have finished Paradise Lost book 1. So next I would this is a poem which uh, is fairly long, so it would not be completed within in one class. So I would uh, I would try to finish it in the offline class on the 17th when the college opens. So let me start the poem, and I will share the screen, and here is the poem for you. So hopefully you can see the poem here. And uh, this is by Sylvia Plath. As I told you, she was an American poet, and she was one of the celebrated female poets. And she was the first wife of uh, Ted Hughes. Ted Hughes was an English poet, and his poem, uh, some of his poems were there in the previous syllabi earlier, but in the CBCS there is no poem by Ted Hughes, but in the new syllabus NEP in first semester there is Crow's Fall. So I have taught that poem to the first semester students. Now let us concentrate on the poet herself, Sylvia Plath. Now I would just try to give you a little bit of an introduction on the poet herself, Sylvia Plath. And Sylvia Plath was born in 1932 in Boston, which is in Massachusetts in the USA. And Daddy refers to her father. Uh, Her father's name was Otto Plath, Otto, O-T-T-O, P-L-A-T-H. Now, actually, Otto Plath was German by birth, and he was a professor um at Boston University. He taught German and biology there. And when she was, Sylvia Plath was only 8 years old, that is in the year 1940, her father died as a result of certain complications. He died of gangrene of the leg, and actually he had diabetes, and certain complications took place uh, as a result of diabetes, and his leg had to be amputated, but finally he died. Now, as far as we can gather, uh, Otto Plath was kind of a strict father, and he was very authoritarian. He was very kind of a not a very loving father towards his daughter Sylvia. And this poem, Daddy, actually it is a kind of an expression of anger, anguish, kind of hatred, you can say. So it is a very uh, kind of enigmatic poem. It reveals a lot about Sylvia Plath herself and her relationship with her father, her father who was not very close to her. In fact, he was a bit distant and authoritarian. So now Sylvia Plath actually she was a well-known poet, and uh, her first collection of poems was titled Colossus, and it was published in 1960 in England and in 1962 in the United States. And in the year Uh, 1956, Sylvia Plath married Ted Hughes, and they had two daughters, actually, one daughter and one son. But Ted Hughes left Sylvia Plath for another woman, and that led to a kind of, it was a kind of a traumatizing experience for her. And Sylvia Plath wrote one semi-autobiographical novel, which is titled "The Bell Jar," and she wrote this novel under the pseudonym Victoria Lucas. And in the year 1963, in February 1963, she committed suicide at a very young age. So her writing career, actually, it is not a very long career, as you can well understand, but she has left behind her a number of poems which are really remarkable, including this one, Daddy. And her poems, actually, they have been characterized as belonging to the confessional movement. Confessional, as you know, something that the poet writes to confess something, to sort of explain something that had occurred in her or his life. So, something that the poet tries to pour out when she tries to pour out her feelings and emotions, confess to others, which things which were secret until then. And her poetry, it had been compared to such contemporaries as Robert Lowell and another poet called Anne Sexton. So it is marked by her poetry is marked by certain very violent and disturbed imagery, and she uses alliteration, which is the repetition of the same consonant, and rhyme. So in this poem also, you will be able to note that kind of violent imagery. And this, this poem Daddy, it is to be found in her collection of poems called Ariel. Uh, and this was published posthumously, that is after her death in the year 1965. And Sylvia Plath, actually, she was the first poet to win the Pulitzer Prize. You must have heard about the Pulitzer Prize. It is a prize that is given to, uh, you know, writers, well-known writers, for their contribution to literature. Sorry. So, and she got the Pulitzer Prize for her collection, the collected poems, and that was in 1982. Now, let us just before beginning to read this poem, let us uh, let me introduce this poem to you. So I have already told you that this was published in the year 1965 in her collection of poems called Ariel, A capital Ariel. And this poem is regarded by critics as an extraordinary achievement. And as I had told you, it is full of anger, it is full of brutal language and certain repetitions of certain ideas which haunted her. And Sylvia Plath, she did not have very smooth, loving relationships with her parents, neither with her mother nor with her father. especially with her father, Otto Plath. And it was, Otto Plath, as I had told you, he was German born, and he was to Sylvia Plath a very cold father. And so uh, she had certain difficulties in her relationships with her parents, especially her father. And Sylvia Plath also believed that her father had been a Nazi. You know who a Nazi was. Uh, Nazi is a person who sympathized with Hitler's uh, ideologies. So you know about Adolf Hitler, who was the ruler of Germany and who started the Second World War. So uh, Nazis were responsible for the killing of so many Jews in the concentration camps. And being a Nazi was absolutely something that was very, very much kind of a degrading thing, demeaning thing. Now, what we know that in this poem, of course, she reacted against him, and here she expressed her sympathy and her, you know, identification at times with the Jews who suffered at the hands of Hitler. And however, though Sylvia Plath believed that her father had been a Nazi, still later scholars, uh, people like Jon Rosenblatt and Paul Breslin, they had uh, indicated that Otto Plath was not a Nazi, and her mother, that is Sylvia's mother, was not Jewish. So she has been criticized for this kind of a standpoint that she had taken. And now, as I told you, that Otto Plath, he died of untreated gangrene, which was caused by diabetes. And Plath was 8 years old, though in the poem, she is referring to herself as being uh, 10 years old, though actually, in reality, she was only 8 years old when her father died. And during his, when he was alive, when her father Otto Plath was alive, Sylvia, of course, could not resolve her feelings, or she could not come to terms with her problematic relationship with her father because she was really too young. And some critics have applied this Electra complex. Perhaps you know about the Oedipus complex and the Electra complex. So, uh, about Sylvia's relationship with her father, her troubled relationship. And now, this poem can be looked upon as a work which is a testimony to of Plath's desire to come to terms with her feelings about her father. And in a BBC broadcast in the year 1962, that is the year prior to her death, Sylvia Plath described this poem in this way, and I will be reading from that quotation. Quote, "Here is a poem spoken by a girl with an Electra complex. Her father died while she thought he was God. Her case is complicated by the fact that her father was also a Nazi and her mother, very possibly, part Jewish. In the daughter, the two strains marry and paralyze each other. She has to act out the awful little allegory once over before she is free of it." So, unquote. So, these are the words that Sylvia Plath used to describe this poem. So, with this short introduction, let us try to analyze this poem Daddy by Sylvia Plath. And this poem actually, as you would see, there would be certain German words which she would be using. You will occasionally find such words. So let us read the first stanza. Uh, you do not do any more, black shoe, in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or achoo. So here, the first line, you do not do anymore, uh, black shoe. So here, Sylvia Plath, she is referring to the life, the kind of life she has lived, and that to her is not good enough. It's not a satisfactory life. And now, as we had seen, that Sylvia Plath's daddy, Otto Plath, he had gangrene and resulting from diabetes, and actually his leg had to be amputated. And Sylvia Plath was really influenced by his death. And in her poems, including this particular poem, you will find that she is referring to her father uh, through certain figures of speech. For example, synecdoche. Synecdoche, that is, she uses a part to refer to the whole. That is a part of the body, that is the leg, like a foot. And uh, calling him a toe or a foot. So actually, I have lived like a foot. So it refers to her father. So the first stanzas, uh, rhyme and repetition sounds. These are characteristic of a kind of a nursery rhyme. A tone which is overturned in the second stanza. So here it shows this description in which I have lived like a foot for 30 years, poor and white, barely daring to breathe or achoo. Uh, now, it shows the tone of the beginning of this poem, that the poet actually, she was being dominated by her father. And the fact that she was almost powerless. She had been living there for 30 years. She had been haunted by the memory of her father. And uh, you do not do, it sounds like a parent, like a father scolding her, scolding his daughter, like that. And now, initially, Sylvia Plath had thought that she would name this poem a birthday present, but eventually she decided to call this Daddy. And this actually is quite in keeping with the sentiments. And we can see that her daddy actually was a kind of an authoritarian, a very distant and uh, kind of a disciplinarian by nature, not at all a loving father. So, in which I have lived like a foot, barely daring to breathe or achoo, that is the last line. Here, in these three lines, you will see that she is relating uh, to a nursery rhyme, to a family which lived in a shoe. So there is a nursery rhyme, English nursery rhyme, where there is a reference to a woman living in a shoe. And it goes like this. Uh, Quote, there was an old woman who lived in a shoe. She had so many children, she didn't know what to do. She gave them some broth without any bread, and whipped them all soundly and put them to bed. Unquote. So here there is this nursery rhyme to which this refers, and this woman who lived in a shoe, and she had a number of children, and she was in a fix. She didn't know how to uh, sort of provide them with food, and so she gave them some broth, that is soup, but she could not give them bread, and that is, she was quite poor. And when they were hungry and they cried out, presumably, she whipped them and put them to bed. So you can just see the kind of comparison or the similarity. Uh, Sylvia Plath's father was also a strict disciplinarian, and he must have scolded her sometimes. I don't know whether she was whipped, but he must have scolded her. And that, of course, did not really leave a very uh, loving or very a favorable memory in her heart or mind. So it is a kind of a nursery rhyme, uh, and poor and white uh, here, of course, uh, uh, daddy here, uh, she refers to herself as being poor and white, not having enough money. She was a white woman. Now, Sylvia Plath was, of course, making use of metaphors through her poems. She stated certain ideas, picked them up later on, and later on you will see how Sylvia Plath refers to her daddy's, quote, fat black heart, unquote, and he being a black man. It's these things are really contrasted with her description of white. And now this word achu, of course, it reveals the capitalization that it means something more than just a sneeze. So this word is used to convey a sneeze. When one sneezes, generally we say that it's an achu or something like that. It is a kind of a capitalized A here in this word that is disruptive and that upsets the rigidity of daddy's control. So uh, barely daring to breathe. So she was afraid, daring to breathe. So she did not even could not breathe properly. It was such a stuffy, such a fearful situation for her. So the first stanza, of course, it refers to her daddy, Otto Plath, and she says that you do not do anymore. That is, you are not able to scold me anymore like you used to do when I was a little girl and I was like a black shoe. Uh, I was living there like a foot for 30 long years, barely daring to breathe or even sneeze. I was so much afraid of you. So this is the, of course, the tone of the poem, the tone of the stanza here. These 5 lines, you can understand the kind of anger that she feels against her daddy. Here, the poem begins with a kind of an angry attack on her father, and it is a kind of a conclusion that she comes that you do not, you are not able to do anything anymore, and she calls him a black shoe. So she had been living there with him in a black shoe like a foot, and uh, she is using these symbols, which are uh, not really ordinary symbols. And living in a shoe, actually, uh, it also refers to the fact that she was living in a very poor state, in a deplorable condition. And Sylvia Plath here uh, adds to the imagery when she says that she has been living in that condition for 30 years, being poor and white, and she is also not able to breathe properly and express her feelings, her pain. She felt circumscribed, she felt really uh, confined and fearful. So this is the first stanza, and here the tone of anger, disappointment, a kind of anguish, it is, all these feelings are expressed. So this is the first stanza for you. Now let us move on to the second stanza, and here the tone becomes it continues like that. Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time. Marble heavy, a bag full of God, ghastly statue with one grey toe, big as a Frisco seal. So this continues with the into the third stanza, but I'll just stop here and explain this. So she addresses her father, and Plath's father died when she was 8 years old. So she says that I had to kill you uh, at an early age, and she had to bury him. Uh, you died before I had time, before I could kill you, and before she could know him properly. And so the contradictory meaning communicated by the poet here, it might be interpreted as meaning that her father died before she had a chance to metaphorically kill her, herself, and which this poem actually serves to say or do. So, Daddy, I have had to kill you. You died before I had time. So, again, she goes on to describe her father as being, within quotations, marble heavy, which makes him appear as a statue and not as a uh, person, individual of flesh and blood, not as a real human being, not her daddy at all, only an innate, lifeless statue without any feelings. So maybe this could be a reference to uh, her assumption that he was a Nazi, and his coldness, how distant he was as a father towards her. And marble heavy, a bag full of gold. So her father was like God to her. So the marble casket contained God, her father. So it was kind of a casket or a box which contained her father. So just as God is distant, it is difficult to know God, and it appears that God is, not very favorable to us. He does not care for us. Likewise, Sylvia Plath feels that her daddy was like that, like God in this way, because of his distant, cold nature. So she was full of awe and wonder when she uh, thought of him, and also she was terrified, and she was kind of separated from him. So as you can see, ghastly statue. So it is a ghastly kind of an ugly kind of a statue, fearful. Ghastly is something that is ugly and fearful to look at. He was like that for him. And she was, of course, Sylvia Plath during her lifetime. She struggled with Christianity, her religion, and some critics believe that maybe these are references, the references to God. These are the references to her struggles with Christianity. So the image of her father comes to us here. Her father was like a god to her, but marble heavy. It also refers to the type of stone commonly used in statues. And the use of this imagery, it fits in with the idea that Plath spent most of her life putting her father on a pedestal. And she wanted a kind of a normal father-daughter relationship. Uh, but she could not have that relationship, that normal relationship with her father, because he was so cold and distant. And ghastly, as I said, it means kind of a causing great horror or fear. So it is frightful or horrible, kind of a grim statue. Ghastly statue with one grey toe. So it is reference to her father's infected foot, which was infected with gangrene due to untreated diabetes. And this poem, as you can see, it's highly autobiographical. It is a confessional poem. She is constantly going to refer to her father, his physical state, and other things here. Big as a frisco sill. Now, big as a frisco sill, it refers to one of the sea lions. It's a kind of an animal of the sea that can be seen in San Francisco. Frisco here means San Francisco. And when Sylvia Plath describes that one of the toes of her father was as big as a seal, it reveals to the reader just how enormous and overbearing her father seemed to her. So he was really a kind of a gigantic figure for her. He was hardened without any kind of feelings, any kind of feeling for her. And now that he is dead, Sylvia Plath feels that he is like a gigantic statue. He is like that, a very horrific, terrible kind of a statue with an infected toe which has turned gray. In the third stanza, and a head in the freakish Atlantic, where it pours bean green over blue, in the waters of beautiful Nauset, I used to pray to recover you. Ach, do. So, in the third stanza, you can see that uh, that in the previous stanza, just in the second stanza, so the images that were used in the second stanza, uh, it gives us certain shapes and qualities to the picture of the poet's father. And the reference, the comparison of her father to this marble statue, it is suggestive of being heavy as well as imposing and fearful. So we have seen that. So in the third stanza, and a head in the freakish Atlantic, here looking, thinking of our dead father, the speaker describes the gorgeous scenery of the Atlantic Ocean and the beautiful area of Nauset. So word freakish to precede her description of the beautiful Atlantic Ocean. And this reveals that even though her father may have been a beautiful specimen of a human being, she knew personally that there was something awful about him. So he might have been good to look at, but he was really awful. So, and ahead in the freakish Atlantic, where it pours beam green over blue, uh, so it refers to the fact that the head of the statue, representing her father, it is coming out from the Atlantic Ocean. It is protruding from the Atlantic Ocean. And this depiction may suggest that his presence for her stretches from coast to coast over the USA, America, and as it did throughout her life. So her dead father actually had a tremendous hold on her mind. So she imagines him now as a big statue, a colossal statue. In the waters of beautiful Nauset, I used to pray to recover you. So here she is referring to this place called Nauset, which is in Massachusetts. And actually, this is a reference to how her family would holiday there in the summer. So it is a kind of an autobiographical reference. And as we know, she was born in Boston, in Massachusetts. And this location is significant for her because she spent some of her formative years here. And when her father died, she must have been praying, must have prayed for him to come back to her, to recover you. I used to pray. So that is what the reference is to this, her attempt or her prayers, so that her father would come back to her when he had died. So so actually you can see the description. The statue's head is in the Atlantic on the coast at Nauset Beach in Cape Cod, where Sylvia Plath used to holiday with her family. So the father figure, the father icon, it stretches all the way across the USA. Her father becomes a kind of a colossal figure, a gigantic figure. And so we can see here that she is referring to her father in this way. And she is trying to uh, think of her father as a figure who is a really uh, a really gigantic figure. Aktu, these are German words. Actually, it means OU. So in German. So here in this third stanza, the description of her father is in these terms. Now in the fourth stanza, in the German tongue, in the Polish town, scraped flat by the roller of wars, but the name of the town is common, my Polak friend. So in the German tongue, in the Polish town, now this could be a reference to the renaming of towns by the invading Germans in World War II. And when they had invaded Poland in 1939, in September 1939, which triggered the Second World War, they captured certain towns in Poland, Polish towns, and they renamed it. And this town called Oswiecim, Oswiecim, was renamed by the Germans as Auschwitz, 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 and a very notorious concentration camp was built up there, where thousands of Jews were killed. And scraped flat by the roller, here Plath seems to be describing the destruction of the Polish town due to war, using the ruler of wars. So she is describing this uh, town which was demolished, destroyed by the Germans, the ruler of wars. And this implies that when the war rolls through towns because of battles, then they leave behind them destruction. So three times you can see that the poet uses the word wars thrice. So the uh, evil effect of war, wars, wars, wars. So the really devastating effect of war. And here, of course, there are references to the German bombings and fightings during Second World War. And the word ruler, actually it might mean, firstly it might mean, of course, wars, but it might also allude to the waves of the Atlantic Ocean breaking on the shores of this place called Nauset. So Plath is referring to the region's long history of violence, and the words are repeated here. And not just to drive home the destruction of war, but she also wants to convey a sense that much of this region had been defined by wars for decades. So war had been quite common here. And it refers to both World War One and World War Two. And so uh, we can see here how she refers to the renaming of the Polish town in the German tongue. So uh, uh, her father, Otto Plath, was born in a Polish town called Grabow, Grabow, but he spoke German and in a very autocratic way. So this town had been demolished, and but the name of the town is common. So this town called Grabow, it was a common name in Poland. So there were other towns also there of the same name. And therefore my Polak friend, that is Polish friend. So as you can see, she goes on in the next stanza. My Polak friend says there are a dozen or two. So my Polish friend says that there is actually more than 12 such towns which are named as Grabow. So, so I never could tell where you put your foot, your root. I never could talk to you. So she is saying to her father that you were born in this town called Grabow, but there are so many towns with that name in Poland that I could never place you. So her father was a German immigrant, Polish immigrant. Yes, he was a German immigrant. But whatever town he originally came from, actually, the town had a common enough name. And Sylvia Plath says that she was never able to place it for certain on a map. So where you put your foot, your roots, so your roots, your ancestry, I never could know that. Thus, Sylvia Plath feels that she was never able to find her father. I never could talk to you. She could never uh, interact with him. So she could not trace his lineage back far enough that it might have given her some meaningful insight into her father's nature. The tongue stuck in my jaw. So here Sylvia Plath is lamenting that she could never talk to her father because her tongue was always stuck. And she continues to say that the area where her tongue got stuck was like a barbed wire snare. In the next stanza, it's stuck in a barbed wire snare. So here we can see here that actually, uh, as we had seen in the first stanza, perhaps her father made her nervous or scared. She felt afraid, or she was not good at speaking German. It could have been that also. And she continues to proclaim that her tongue got stuck badly, and she could not talk in a smooth way. It stuck in a barbed wire snare. Ich, 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 ich. So now, ich is the German equivalent for I. So she could only say ik, that is I. Actually, she wanted to say something, but she could not have the command over that German language, or she was afraid of her father. She felt nervous, and as she says here, it got stuck in a barbed wire. She could not get the words out. I could hardly speak. I thought every German was you, and the language obscene. So here she says that here she is addressing her father directly, and she says that I never could talk to you. And she is hinting at a lack of communication, of instability, and a kind of a paralysis, as if she got paralyzed. She could not pronounce her words. And she had a kind of distaste for Germans. And she thought that her father was like the other Germans, he was like that. And the language was obscene, it was ugly, and it was really a shameful language to be using, to be speaking in. So, of course, as we can see here, so here the barbed wire is a kind of a snare, it is a trap, and as it were, it would trap her tongue, and it would rip her tongue to shreds. And the wire snare, it is repeated by Plath in another poem that she had written, and that poem is titled The Rabbit Catcher. And that poem deals with the end of her relationship with Ted Hughes, her husband. And Here these all these ich, ich, it refers to I, as you can see. So uh, I'll explain this stanza. I will explain it in detail in my offline class. So I will stop sharing the screen with you